is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. It is Friday. It's Anything Goes Friday, whatever you'd like to talk about. Our number, 202-808-9925. That said, there are a few things that I'd like to talk about. The 1%. Actually, I want to start someplace else. I'm going to get to that in just a second. But back when George W. Bush was president, so this was at least 10 years ago. So it was, let's see, I wrote Unequal Protection in 2001, as I recall. 2000 and 2001. It was published in 2002. And I was invited to Oxford University in the UK, in Britain, to give a speech about corporate personhood in the United States and how it was presenting itself in other countries, including the UK. And I showed up, and it was a very big deal. I mean, it was a great honor. And the president of the college that was sponsoring us, as I recall, it was Christ Church, but I could be wrong. But the president of the college had a private dinner for me afterwards with a whole bunch of the various department heads, and it was really cool. But what happened, what was just fascinating to me, this must have been like 2004. It was in that neighborhood, maybe 2003. It was right after Bush invaded Iraq, or in the year after he had invaded Iraq. So I show up at the university, and they take me to the hall where I'm speaking, and it's just like something out of an old movie. You know, it's you know, this thing was probably, the building was probably built 200 years ago. It's like, you know, it's all, you know, granite and looks sort of like a giant cathedral sort of thing. And the hall that I'm in is, you know, with the, you know, like the old Roman amphitheaters, you know, with the tiered seats going up, you know, so that the people sitting at the very top, at the top row, are like 20 feet above my head, and I'm on the stage out in front. And there was maybe 200 people there, and most of them, the vast majority of them, were students. They were people in their early 20s. And I'm there to talk about corporate personhood in my new book, Unequal Protection. But what happens is, literally, and we all use that word way too much, but anyhow, what happened was, before I could speak about corporate personhood, I got essentially heckled. And not in a bad way, but in a, you know, where do you stand? The young people in the room, the students, started yelling, you know, where do you stand on Bush? And words to that effect. You know, what are your thoughts on Bush? Tell us what about the Iraq War? What, you know, is your president crazy? Stuff like that. And literally, well, there I go again, wouldn't let me get into my talk until I addressed that issue. And, you know, presumably a lot of people of a lot of different political persuasions and opinions come through Oxford, and, you know, they just wanted to know what's your deal. So I said, okay, let me just be on the record. I did not vote for George W. Bush. I do not like George W. Bush. I think he represents our country poorly. I am embarrassed by him. And, you know, I think he's promulgating a vision of America as kind of the ugly American all across the world. And there was, you know, polite applause, and then everybody kind of sat down and shut up and let me do my hour-long presentation on corporate personhood, you know, which was what I was there to do. And I kind of feel like we're in the same place. Louise and I were talking about this morning. And in fact, it was her suggestion that I discuss this, and I think it was spot on right. Where the rest of the world is looking at us going, really? The President of the United States is picking a fight with this little guy in this little country and threatening nuclear holocaust to one of our allies? I mean, you know, if you take out North Korea, you're taking out South Korea. You're killing 28,000 American troops or more, and possibly millions of people in Seoul and the rest of South Korea. The story in right-wing circles right now that's going around, the Republican story, is, oh, finally somebody's talking tough, right? Trump is going to scare the hell out of them because they're going to think he's crazy. And because they think he's crazy, they're going to be afraid to do anything, and everything's going to be just wonderful. Now, one of the advantages of being an old fart like I am is that I remember when part of Richard Nixon's theory was that, in fact, part of his sales pitch, I don't recall if it was the election of 68 or the election of 72. I'm pretty sure it was the election of 72. In both cases, he said he had a secret plan to end the war. It turns out his secret plan in 68 was to sabotage the peace deal that LBJ had worked out because he was running against LBJ's vice president, Hubert Humphrey. But my recollection is that his secret peace deal in 72 was never clearly articulated, but what his front people were saying basically was, you know, Nixon's a madman. He could use nukes. North Vietnam better surrender quick. And the whole Christmas bombing and everything else, all this stuff, that it was all that this is what was going on. And for a while, that was like, Republicans held that up like this is a good thing, that the leaders of North Vietnam think that our president is insane. And those of you old enough to remember, you know, the Vietnam War, you probably remember what I'm talking about. And I've heard, read conservative commentators saying that Donald Trump is doing the Nixon thing. He's trying to scare the hell out of Kim Jong-un to say, you know, hey, I'm a crazy man. I don't care. I'll fire off nukes. And that's a good thing. And the last time we were told that that was a good thing, about 2 million Vietnamese died. And as I recall, 56,000 American soldiers died. Or at least the 20,000 or so that died after Nixon got elected. So, you know, I would love to hear your thoughts on, what your thoughts are on that, and I'll tell you these are mine. I think this is not a wise strategy. I think it may play well with Trump's base, and that's the problem. Just like Nixon was running for re-election and his numbers were not all that great in 72, although, George McGovern turned out to be largely because of the Tom Eagleton fiasco. The Democrat was George McGovern, and his first vice presidential candidate turned out he'd had electroconvulsive shock therapy, which is typically only done with pretty severe depression, which at that time was considered a terrible mental illness. And so he had to dump Eagleton and get whoever he got. It's been a long time. I don't remember who it was. But in any case, but still, Nixon still had some serious currents going against him. And I think that Trump and his advisors are thinking the same. I mean, keep in mind, Roger Stone, who advised Nixon, is advising Trump. Before he died, Roger Ailes, who advised Nixon, was advising Trump. So there's a bunch of old Nixon guys around Trump, and Trump is playing the Nixon thing from Vietnam. And I would like to remind us all that Vietnam did not turn out well. And I don't see, Pence doing anything, but I don't see any, savior here other than common sense and rationality. And frankly, it's kind of ironic, but but the media story on Kim Jong-un is that he's a crazy, he's 33 years old, that he's a crazy kid. The reality is he's not a crazy kid. Kim Jong-un came to power when he was 27 years old, controlling a totally despotic state. He had two older brothers who were both in the line of succession from his father. He succeeded in politically outmaneuvering both of them to the point that when he was 27, he became the head of North Korea. And he immediately set about killing or silencing his opposition and consolidating his power. He has economically slightly loosened the strings of power in North Korea, which has allowed that country to grow. You know, their annual GDP growth rate has been running between 7 and 9%, as well as anybody can figure. So, you know, he might even be popular in his country. It's hard to tell because anybody who speaks out against him is instantly put to death. But my point is that, here's the irony, is that I'm not relying on Donald Trump to be the rational one who's going to save us from nuclear war. I'm relying on Kim Jong-un because he has a finely tuned survival sense. He has survived this far, this long, and his family, the 2 generations before him, did the same thing. He is not an idiot. He may be, I mean, you know, you've been growing up thinking you're the descendant of the sun god and all this kind of stuff. You know, he's probably got a very, very bizarre and twisted mind, but he knows how to run his country, at least the way he wants to. Now, none of this should be construed as praise for Kim Jong-un. The guy's one of the planet's worst murderous tyrants. But here's the bizarre thing is when one of the planet's worst murderous tyrants is more reassuring to you than the President of the United States, that should be some kind of absolute bottom line reference point where you say, you know, there's something wrong here. Let's have a conversation about that 25th Amendment thing and putting together a panel of people who can determine, you know, as the 25th Amendment provides for. It can either be the president's cabinet or Congress can create a panel of people who will sit down and say, you know, this guy is not fit for office. Or maybe if, you know, in the 2018 elections, if, you know, the world is still here, and if the Republicans get wiped out, maybe the party will turn against Trump. But this is not a good situation. Okay, so the Korea thing, the added piece to this, you know, my question, you know, do you feel like the ugly American? And I know that there are Trump supporters out there who are just like super happy to hear Donald Trump say, you know, I know you talked that way to previous presidents. In other words, you know, that Democrat Barack Obama and that wimpy George W. Bush, but now you're talking to me. Right, and so there's some folks out there who are going, yeah, that's what we want. We want a tough guy in the White House. Well, you know, generally speaking, I don't have a problem with a tough guy in the White House as long as the tough guy is doing rational policy. Franklin Roosevelt fought World War II. Millions of people died. It was a god-awful, horrific war. He ordered just the firebombing of Dresden was as consequential an event in terms of human life and mass destruction as was the bombing of Hiroshima. The firebombing of Tokyo, for that matter, was about equally destructive. We've had tough guys in the White House before. Jack Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. But they didn't beat their chests. They didn't do the I alpha male thing that Donald Trump is doing right now. And that Kim Jong-un is doing. Or maybe not. Maybe Kim is just, you know, doing the thing he's always done. I don't know. But anyhow, China came out this morning, or overnight, or last night, and it's one of the less well-publicized events, but I thought it was an amazing thing. And just made it very, very real. China, which presumably has nuclear weapons and the ability to deploy them. China came out and said that if North Korea strikes us first, they are hands off. That was a message directed to Kim. You poke the United States, you hit the United States, all bets are off. On the other hand, China said, if the United States strikes North Korea first, we're at war with China. Do you have any idea what the consequences of a war with China would be, given how dependent we are on them for everything? We cannot build a cruise missile or a submarine or an aircraft carrier or even an airplane without parts from China. We have outsourced to China the core of our technology and the essence of our manufacturing capability. It was a stupid policy from the get-go. I know this is Reagan's great dream, arguably Nixon's great dream. The Republicans have been pushing for this forever. You know, it's the whole libertarian thing. No borders, right? Who needs borders? All you need is oligarchs. Just billionaires to control everything, and wonderful life. Life will be great. But that's not how, it's not how it worked out.